A wealthy Korean mafia boss comes home to find his 5-year-old son screaming at the window, tears streaming down his face. Outside, in the freezing snow, their beautiful black maid lies collapsed against the house, her lips turning purple, her body shaking violently. She's wearing nothing but a thin cotton uniform. No coat, no shoes. The temperature? -15 degrees. How did she end up out there? His own mother, his elegant, respected mother, locked her out after accusing her of stealing family heirloom pearl earrings. But here's what makes your blood boil. The earrings were in his mother's pocket the entire time. She fabricated the crime. She sent an innocent woman into a killing cold over pure jealousy, because her grandson loved this black woman more than he loved his own grandmother. The boy had watched it all, watched his grandmother push Grace out into the blizzard, watched her lock the door. And now he's screaming like his soul is being ripped apart, convinced he's about to lose another mother, just like he lost the first one 2 years ago. But what the grandmother didn't count on, what she never saw coming, was what her son would do when he discovered the truth. And trust me, when a man who built an empire on fear and violence finds out his own mother tried to murder the woman who saved his child, the consequences are something you won't forget. Before we start the story, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. If stories about karma, love, and hidden truths move you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The snow began falling at 3:47 in the afternoon, exactly 12 minutes before Grace Okoye would sing her last song of the day in that kitchen. She didn't know this, of course. None of them did. The flakes were small at first, innocent, the kind that melt the moment they touch warm skin. Grace stood at the marble counter, her slender hands moving rhythmically as she chopped vegetables for the evening meal. Her voice, soft and melodic, carried an Igbo lullaby her own mother had sung to her decades ago, an ocean away. Minjun sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, his small fingers wrapped around a red crayon. He was drawing another picture for Grace, his 5th that week. This one showed 2 figures holding hands beneath a smiling sun, one tall, one small. He looked up at her with those wide, trusting eyes that still believed the world was fundamentally good. Grace smiled down at him, unaware that Han Soo-jin was watching from the doorway. The older woman's face was a mask of ice, her elegant fingers gripping the doorframe until her knuckles turned white. She had been standing there for 7 minutes, watching this scene that filled her with a rage she couldn't fully name. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, something that tasted like fear. The boy loved this woman, her grandson, her blood, the last piece of her son's dead wife, loved this stranger more than he loved his own grandmother. Soo-jin could see it in every glance, every laugh, every unconscious movement Minjun made toward Grace instead of toward her. Grace finished chopping and wiped her hands on her apron. She moved to the stove, still humming, still unaware. The kitchen smelled of garlic and ginger, scents that would soon be replaced by something far colder. Minjun held up his drawing. "Grace, look! It's you and me!" She knelt beside him, her knees touching the cold tile floor. "It's beautiful, baby. You're such a talented artist. Will you keep it forever? Forever and ever." Soo-jin felt something crack inside her chest. Forever. This woman, this outsider, promised her grandson forever, as if she had any right to make such promises. As if she belonged here. As if she were family. The older woman stepped into the kitchen, her heels clicking against the floor with military precision. Grace stood immediately, her posture shifting from relaxed to deferential in an instant. She had learned this dance well over the past 8 months. Lower your eyes, soften your voice, make yourself smaller. "Minjuna," Soo-jin said, her voice honey-sweet, but with an edge that Grace had learned to recognize. "Come with Harmony. You shouldn't spend so much time with the help." The boy's face fell. "But Grace is my friend." "She is an employee. There is a difference. You must learn this difference." Grace kept her eyes down, her heart hammering. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, to say that she loved this child as if he were her own. But she needed this job. Her sister's university tuition was due in 3 weeks. Her mother's medication cost more each month. She could not afford pride. Minjun grabbed Grace's hand, his small fingers surprisingly strong. No, I want to stay with Grace. Sujin's mouth tightened into a thin line. She saw it then, clear as daylight. The way the boy clung to this woman, the way he looked at her with devotion that should have been reserved for his own blood. The way Grace, despite her lowered eyes, radiated a warmth that Sujin herself had never been able to offer. It was intolerable. The older woman's eyes swept the kitchen, searching for something, anything to break this spell. They landed on her jewelry box, which she had brought down earlier to show her grandson the family heirlooms. The pearl earrings. Her mother's pearl earrings, the ones she had worn at her own wedding 50 years ago. They sat in the velvet box on the counter, gleaming softly in the afternoon light. An idea formed in Sujin's mind, dark and sharp as broken glass. She looked at Grace, then at the pearls, then back at Grace. The woman's own mother would have been proud of how quickly she moved. "My earrings," Sujin said, her voice rising with manufactured panic. "Where are my pearl earrings?" Grace looked up, confused. "Ma'am, they're right there, in the box on the—" But Sujin had already moved. Her hand swept the jewelry box into her pocket with practiced speed, a magician's misdirection. Minjin was still holding Grace's hand, distracted. Grace was looking at where the box had been, her mind struggling to catch up. "They're gone!" Sujin's voice climbed higher, sharper. "You stole them! You thief!" The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Grace's eyes went wide with shock, her mouth opening but no words coming out. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. "I never— Señora Han, I would never— Liar! Thief! You come into my home, you corrupt my grandson, and now you steal from us. Please, I didn't take anything, I swear on my mother's life." But Sujin was already moving toward the phone, her finger stabbing at the numbers. "I'm calling the police. They'll search you. They'll find the truth." Panic flooded Grace's body like ice water. The police. Immigration might get involved. Her visa status was complicated. One wrong question, one suspicious officer, and she could be deported. 8 months of sending money home, gone. Her sister's education, finished. Everything she had sacrificed, destroyed. She ran, not toward the front door, but toward her small room off the kitchen, desperate to grab her phone, her documents, something to prove her innocence. Sujin watched her go, waited 3 seconds, then followed. She moved with purpose, with the cold calculation of someone who had already decided how this scene would end. Grace reached her room, her hands shaking as she fumbled for her phone. Behind her, she heard the door slam. The lock clicked. She spun around, her heart in her throat. "Señora Han? You're a thief and a liar. Get out of my house." "My coat, please, it's freezing outside. Just let me get my—" But Sujin was already walking away, already pushing Grace toward the back door that led to the garden. The door that led to the snow, which was no longer small and innocent, but falling in thick, heavy curtains. "Out. Now. Before I tell the police you try to attack me too." Grace stumbled backward, her thin uniform dress offering no protection against the cold that rushed in as Sujin opened the door. "Please, just my coat, I'm begging you." The older woman's face was stone. Absolute. Final. "You should have thought of that before you betrayed our trust." She pushed Grace across the threshold. The cold hit like a physical blow, stealing Grace's breath. She turned back, reaching for the door handle, but Sujin was faster. The door slammed shut. The lock turned with a sound like a bone breaking. Grace stood in the snow, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps that turned to white clouds in the freezing air. She was wearing only her thin cotton uniform. Her feet were in house slippers. The temperature was dropping rapidly as the storm intensified. Inside, Minjun had heard the commotion. He came running, his small feet padding across the floor. He reached the window just as his grandmother was walking away from the back door, her face calm, satisfied. "Harmony, where's Grace?" "She had to leave, darling. She was a bad person." But Minjin was already running to the front window, some instinct pulling him there. And that's when he saw her. Grace, illuminated by the garden lights, stumbling through the deepening snow, her arms wrapped around herself, her body already beginning to shake violently. The boy's scream pierced the house like a siren. "Grace! Grace, no!" He pressed his hands against the cold glass, his breath fogging the window. Tears streamed down his face as he watched the only mother figure he could remember slowly disappear into the white darkness. Sujin stood behind him, her hand reaching out to comfort him, then pulling back. Something in her grandson's face made her pause. It wasn't just sadness. It was horror. It was betrayal. It was the exact look her own son had given her 20 years ago, when she had driven away his first love. The girl who wasn't Korean enough, wasn't wealthy enough, wasn't enough. History, it seemed, had a way of repeating itself in the worst possible ways. Outside, Grace fell to her knees in the snow. 23 minutes passed. 23 minutes in which Grace Okoye's body temperature dropped from 98.6 degrees to 94.2. 23 minutes in which Min-jun screamed himself hoarse at the window, his small fists pounding the glass, until Sujin finally pulled him away, carried him kicking and sobbing to his room, and locked that door too. 23 minutes in which the snow accumulated 3 inches on the ground, and twice that in drifts against the side of the house where Grace had collapsed, her back pressed against the cold brick, her arms wrapped tight around her trembling body. She tried to pray. The words came out broken, stuttered by her chattering teeth. "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." Her lips were turning purple. Her fingers had gone numb 5 minutes ago. "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done." She thought of her sister, Chiamaka, sitting in a lecture hall in Lagos, taking notes, dreaming of becoming a doctor. On earth as it is in heaven. She thought of her mother, waiting for the monthly transfer that kept food on the table and medicine in the cabinet. "Give us this day our daily bread." Grace's eyes closed. The cold was starting to feel warm now, a dangerous warmth that she knew from the stories her uncle had told about the winter he spent in Moscow. The warmth that comes before the end. Inside the house, Sujin sat in her armchair, her hands folded in her lap, her pearl earrings in her pocket where they had been all along. She listened to the silence. Min-jun had finally stopped screaming. The house was quiet again, orderly, as it should be. As it had been before that woman arrived and disrupted everything with her smiles and her songs and her unwelcome love. The older woman told herself she had done the right thing. She told herself that Grace would find shelter somewhere, would go to a friend's house, would survive. People like her always survived, didn't they? They were resilient, strong, used to hardship. Sujin told herself many things in those 23 minutes. What she didn't tell herself was the truth. That she had sent a woman into a killing cold with no protection. That she had manufactured a crime to justify cruelty. That her grandson, upstairs in his locked room, would never forget this night. Would carry it like a scar across his soul for the rest of his life. She didn't tell herself these things because to do so would be to admit what she really was. And Han Sujin had spent 68 years never admitting what she really was. The Bentley's engine cut through the silence at exactly 4:17. Sujin heard it first, that low, expensive purr that announced her son's arrival. She felt a flutter of something in her chest. Not quite fear, not quite guilt. Something between the two that she quickly suffocated. Park Ji-hoon was on his phone when he pulled into the circular driveway, his voice low and dangerous as he discussed percentages and territories and consequences with someone who had made the mistake of skimming profits from the wrong shipment. He was tired. It had been a long day of meetings that weren't really meetings, of handshakes that were really threats, of smiles that promised violence. All he wanted was to come home, kiss his son goodnight, and pretend for a few hours that he was a normal father living a normal life. But when he looked up at the house, he saw something that made his blood freeze. The window. The front window where Min-jun usually pressed his face to watch for his father's return. The boy was there, but something was wrong. His small hands were flat against the glass, his mouth open in a scream Ji-hoon couldn't hear through the car's thick windows. The phone dropped from his hand. He was out of the car before the engine stopped ticking, his long legs carrying him across the driveway in seconds. The front door burst open under his hand. Minjun! The boy's head snapped toward the sound of his father's voice. His face was red and swollen, streaked with tears and snot. He looked like he had been crying for hours, for days, for his entire short life. Appa! Appa! Minjun's voice was raw, shredded. Grace! Grace is outside! Hamani locked her out! She's going to die like Amma! She's going to die! The words hit Ji-hoon like bullets. He spun toward the window, his eyes scanning the snow-covered garden. At first, he saw nothing. Just white. Just the storm. Then his eyes adjusted, and he saw the dark shape against the side of the house. A shape that wasn't moving. Everything inside Park Ji-hoon went very, very quiet. It was the same quiet that came before he hurt people, before he made decisions that ended lives and destroyed families. But this time the quiet was different. This time it was laced with something he hadn't felt in years. Terror. He ran to the back door, his hands already reaching for the lock. It was secured from the inside. He could see Grace through the glass panel, maybe 15 feet away, crumpled against the wall like discarded trash. Iomiani! Sujin appeared at the top of the stairs, descending slowly, her face composed. Ji-hoona, you're home early. I was just about to... Where is the key? His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the voice he used when he wanted someone to understand that their next words would determine whether they lived or died. Sujin had heard this voice before, but never directed at her. The key to what, dear? The back door, now. She hesitated. In that hesitation, she revealed everything. Ji-hoon saw it, saw the calculation in her eyes, saw her deciding whether to continue the lie or pivot to a new strategy. He didn't wait. He grabbed the decorative vase from the hall table, a Ming Dynasty piece worth $40,000, and hurled it through the back door's glass panel. The sound of shattering was like breaking ice, like the end of something that could never be repaired. Minjun watched from the window as his father reached through the broken glass, unlocked the door from the inside, and ran into the snow in his expensive Italian shoes and his tailored suit. Watched as his father, who never ran, who never showed fear, dropped to his knees beside Grace's motionless body. Grace. Grace, look at me. Open your eyes. Ji-hoon's hands were shaking as he touched her face. Her skin was ice. Her lips were the color of a bruise. For one terrible moment, he thought she was already gone. Thought he had arrived too late. Thought history was repeating itself in the cruelest possible way. His wife, Hae-jin, had died in a hospital bed, her body cold despite the heated blankets, her hand limp in his as the machines beeped their final song. He had been too late then, too, stuck in a meeting he couldn't leave, making deals with devils while the mother of his child slipped away. Not again. Please, God, not again. Grace's eyelids fluttered. A small sound escaped her blue lips, barely more than a breath. Ji-hoon didn't think. He stripped off his coat, his hands moving with the efficiency of a man who had dressed wounds and carried bodies before. He wrapped the coat around Grace, then lifted her into his arms. She weighed nothing, this woman who had somehow become essential to his son's happiness. She weighed nothing, and everything. He carried her inside, past his mother who stood frozen at the foot of the stairs, past the broken glass and the scattered flowers from the shattered vase. Minjun ran to them immediately, his small hands reaching for Grace, his tears falling onto her face. Is she dead? Appa, is she dead like Amma? No. Ji-hoon's voice was steel. No, she's not dead. Get blankets from your room, all of them, now. The boy ran, grateful for a task, grateful to be useful. Ji-hoon laid Grace on the leather sofa in the living room, the one his mother always complained people shouldn't sit on because it was for guests, for show. He didn't care. He grabbed the throw blankets from the other chairs, piled them on top of her shaking body. Her eyes opened fully then, unfocused and confused. Am I dead? No, you're safe. You're inside. I didn't steal anything. The words were slurred, her tongue thick with cold. Jihoon felt something dark and violent rise in his chest. He turned to where his mother stood, still frozen, still silent. What did she just say? Sujin's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She took my pearl earrings, my mother's. Where are they? What? The earrings, where are they? Jihoon stood, and in that moment, he looked exactly like what he was. A man who had built an empire on fear and violence. A man who knew how to make people tell the truth. Sujin's hand moved involuntarily to her pocket. The gesture was small, almost imperceptible, but Park Ji-hoon had spent 20 years reading body language the way priests read scripture. He saw his mother's hand twitch toward her pocket, saw the flash of panic in her eyes, saw the truth written across her face in letters of fire. He crossed the room in 3 strides. Sujin stepped backward, her spine hitting the wall. Show me. Ji-hoon, I don't know what you— Show me your pockets. His hand shot out, not touching her but blocking any escape. Sujin had never been physically afraid of her son before. She had manipulated him, controlled him, shaped him into the man she needed him to be. But she had never feared him. She feared him now. Her trembling hand reached into her pocket and pulled out the small velvet box. The pearl earrings gleamed inside, exactly where they had been all along, exactly where she had put them 27 minutes ago. The silence that followed was the kind that exists before earthquakes, before tsunamis, before the world breaks apart. Minjin returned with an armful of blankets, his small face still wet with tears. He stopped in the doorway, sensing the tension, understanding in the way children do that something irreversible was happening. Ji-hoon took the jewelry box from his mother's hand. He opened it slowly, almost ceremonially. The pearls stared back at him like accusing eyes. You lied. His voice was barely a whisper, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he had shouted. You sent her out there to die over a lie. I was protecting this family. Can't you see what's happening? Your son loves her more than he loves us. More than he loves you. She's destroying everything we built. She's saved the only thing that matters. The words exploded from Ji-hoon's throat. Since Hyejin died, Minjin hasn't smiled, hasn't laughed, hasn't been a child. Until Grace came. Grace, who you just tried to murder in our own backyard. Murder? Don't be dramatic. I simply removed her from— It's -15 degrees outside. Ji-hoon's voice dropped back to that deadly calm. She was in a cotton dress. No coat, no shoes. You locked her out in a blizzard after accusing her of a crime you invented. What do you call that, Omeoni? What pretty word makes that acceptable? Sujin's face crumpled. Not with remorse, but with the realization that she had miscalculated. That her son, her carefully controlled son, was slipping from her grasp just like his father had, just like everyone eventually did. I did it for you, for Minjin, to preserve our family's integrity. Our family's integrity? Ji-hoon laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I run a criminal organization, Omeoni. I launder money. I threaten people. I've had men hurt for crossing me. And you know what? Even I have never done anything as cruel as what you just did to an innocent woman who has shown my son nothing but love. He turned away from her, walked back to Grace, who was beginning to shiver violently under the pile of blankets. Minjin had crawled onto the sofa beside her, his small body pressed against hers as if he could transfer his warmth through sheer will. Grace. Ji-hoon knelt beside the sofa, his voice gentle now. I need you to stay awake. Can you do that for me? Stay awake and keep talking. Her eyes struggled to focus on his face. I didn't take anything. I know you didn't. My mother lied. The earrings were in her pocket the whole time. Grace's face twisted with something between relief and despair. Why? Why would she? Because she's a coward. Ji-hoon didn't look at his mother when he said it. Because she was afraid of losing control, so she tried to destroy you instead. Minjin's small voice cut through the tension. Grace, don't leave. Please don't leave like Amma did. The woman's trembling hand found the boy's face, her frozen fingers barely able to move. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Jihoon stood and walked to the thermostat, cranking the heat up to 80 degrees. Then he went to the kitchen, filled a pot with warm water, not hot, grabbed dish towels. He had learned about hypothermia years ago, in a different life, when he was still pretending he might become something legitimate. The knowledge came back now, clinical and clear. Warm the core first, gradual rewarming, watch for cardiac arrest. He returned to the living room and began the careful process of warming Grace's hands and feet with the towels soaked in warm water. She hissed in pain as sensation began to return. I'm sorry, he murmured. I know it hurts. That means you're alive. Sujin watched from her position against the wall, watched her son tend to this woman with a gentleness she had never seen him show anyone except his wife and child. Watched her grandson cling to this stranger as if she were the last solid thing in a dissolving world. Watched her carefully constructed kingdom crumble into dust. Jihoon, she tried again, her voice smaller now. I made a mistake. I see that now. But surely we can... You need to leave. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. What? Pack your things. You're leaving this house tonight. This is my home. I've lived here for... This is my house. Jihoon's voice was final, absolute. My name on the deed, my money that pays for everything, and you are no longer welcome here. You can't do this. I'm your mother. He finally looked at her then, and Sujin saw something in her son's eyes that made her blood run cold. She saw the same look he had given her 30 years ago when she had told him his father was dead, when she had lied about the car accident, when she had kept the truth about the suicide from him for months. He knew. He had always known. And he had never forgiven her. You are my mother, Jihoon said quietly. But you stopped being Minjun's grandmother the moment you locked that door. Minjun looked up from where he was curled against Grace. His voice was small but clear. I don't want Hun Money here anymore. She hurt Grace. She's mean. The words came from a 5-year-old child, but they landed like hammer blows. Sujin felt something inside her chest crack open, something she had kept locked away for decades. It felt like grief. It felt like the consequences of 1,000 small cruelties finally coming home to roost. Minjuna, I was trying to protect you. You hurt my Grace. The boy's voice rose to a scream. You hurt her and you lied. I hate you. The child dissolved into sobs. Grace, despite her own pain, despite her body still shaking with cold, pulled him closer and whispered soothing words in Igbo, in English, in the universal language of maternal comfort. Jihoon walked to his mother, close enough that only she could hear his next words. You have 1 hour to pack. I'll arrange for a hotel. Tomorrow, we'll discuss a permanent living situation. But you will never sleep under this roof again. Where will I go? I don't care. The words were brutal in their honesty. You nearly killed someone tonight. You traumatized my son. You revealed yourself to be exactly what I always suspected you were. A woman so afraid of being irrelevant that she'd rather destroy than share. Sujin's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage, of humiliation, of the bitter realization that she had finally pushed too far. You'll regret this, she whispered. When she leaves, when she breaks your heart and your son's heart, when she takes whatever she can and disappears, you'll remember that I tried to warn you. Jihoon smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Grace has been here 8 months. In that time, she's never asked for anything except her salary. She's never stolen anything. She's never done anything but love my son when no one else seemed capable of it. If she leaves, it will be because we don't deserve her, not because she doesn't deserve us. He turned his back on his mother, a gesture of dismissal so absolute it needed no words. Sujin stood there for another moment, waiting for him to turn around, to soften, to be the obedient son she had raised. But Jihoon kept his back to her, kept his attention on Grace and Minjun, kept his mother erased from his vision as completely as if she had never existed. Finally, she climbed the stairs to pack her things, each step heavier than the last. Grace's shivering began to subside around 5:30, an hour and 13 minutes after Jihoon had carried her inside. Her lips were no longer purple, though they were cracked and dry. Her fingers, wrapped in warm towels, had regained their color. Minjun had fallen asleep against her shoulder, exhausted from crying, his small hand clutching a fistful of her uniform dress, as if afraid she might vanish if he let go. Jihoon sat in the armchair across from them, watching. He had sent 3 text messages in the past hour. The first to his driver, instructing him to take his mother to the Waldorf and charge it to the company account. The second to his lawyer, requesting paperwork for a restraining order. The third to his accountant, setting up a separate trust fund that would ensure his mother was comfortable, but never again held financial power over his household. He was methodical when he destroyed things, even relationships. Upstairs, he could hear Sujin moving around, opening drawers, closing suitcases. Part of him, a small part he despised, wanted to go to her, to comfort her, to be the good son she had trained him to be for 68 years. But then he looked at Grace, at the woman who had nearly died because of his mother's jealousy and pride, and that impulse died. Grace's eyes opened slowly. They found his face across the dim room. "Mr. Park." Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Jihoon, please. After everything, I think we can dispense with formalities." A ghost of a smile touched her cracked lips. "Jihoon, then. I should go. I should pack my things and—" "No." The word was firm, final. Grace blinked in confusion. "I don't understand. Your mother, she accused me of—" "My mother lied. The earrings were in her pocket. She fabricated the entire thing to have an excuse to remove you from this house, from Minjun's life." Grace was silent for a long moment, processing this. When she spoke again, her voice trembled with something that wasn't cold, but rage. "She was willing to let me die. Over jealousy. Over a child's affection." "Yes." "And you want me to stay? In a house where someone hated me enough to do that?" Jihoon leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped. "She's leaving. Tonight. She will never set foot in this house again. I'm having my lawyer draft a restraining order in the morning." "You're choosing me over your own mother?" "I'm choosing my son over my mother's cruelty. There's a difference." He paused, looked down at his hands. They were the hands that had signed death warrants, that had counted blood money, that had done terrible things in the name of business and survival. "And I'm choosing the woman who has given my son back his childhood, who sings to him, who makes him laugh, who loves him without expecting anything in return." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I do love him. I love him like he's mine." "I know. He loves you like you're his." Jihoon's voice cracked slightly. "When his mother died, I watched him disappear inside himself. He stopped talking, stopped playing, stopped being a little boy. The therapist said he was traumatized, that he needed time. But time wasn't what he needed. He needed someone to see him, to be present with him, to make him feel safe enough to be vulnerable again. You did that. In 8 months, you did what I couldn't do in 2 years." Minjun stirred against Grace's shoulder but didn't wake. She stroked his hair absently, her movements automatic and tender. "I can't stay as a maid," she said quietly. "Not after this. Not knowing what your mother thought of me, what she was willing to do. I can't go back to lowering my eyes and calling you sir and pretending that tonight didn't happen." "Then don't." Jihoon stood, walked to the window where the snow was still falling, thick and relentless. "Stay as family, as Minjun's nanny, as someone with a real contract, real benefits, real respect. Your own room in the East Wing, control over your own schedule. A salary that reflects your actual value to this household." "Why would you do that?" He turned to face her, and in the lamplight, Grace could see the exhaustion etched into his features. This man who looked so dangerous, so controlled, was barely holding himself together. Because I'm failing him, Ji-hoon said simply. I work 16-hour days. I come home and I'm too tired to read him stories. I miss school events. I forget to ask about his day. I'm becoming my father, and my father was a ghost who happened to live in the same house as me. He swallowed hard. But you see him. You know that he's afraid of thunderstorms because they sound like the machines that kept his mother alive. You know that he only eats carrots if they're cut into circles. You know that he needs 3 stories and 2 songs before he can fall asleep. You know my son better than I do, and that should shame me. But instead, it just makes me grateful that someone does. Grace was crying now, silent tears tracking down her face. You're not failing him. You're here now. You saved me. He saw that. He saw his father fight for what was right. I almost didn't come home in time. I was going to work late. There was a meeting, and I almost stayed for it. Ji-hoon's voice dropped to a whisper. I almost let you die because I prioritized a meeting over coming home to my son. What kind of father does that make me? A human one. A flawed one. The only kind that exists. They sat in silence for a moment. 2 broken people in a broken house, with a sleeping child between them, who represented all their failures and all their hopes. Upstairs, a door closed. Footsteps descended the stairs. Sujin appeared in the foyer, 2 suitcases beside her, her coat buttoned to her chin. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. She looked at her son, at the woman on the sofa, at the grandson who slept peacefully against the woman's shoulder. For just a moment, something like regret flickered across her face. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the rigid pride that had defined her entire life. I'll be at the Waldorf, she said. When you come to your senses, when you realize what a mistake you're making, you know where to find me. Ji-hoon didn't turn around. Goodbye, Omeoni. The door opened. Cold air rushed in. The door closed. She was gone. Minjin's eyes opened at the sound. He looked around, confused, then settled when he saw Grace was still there. Is Halmoni gone? Yes, Ji-hoon said gently. Good. The boy closed his eyes again. Grace, you're staying, right? Forever? Grace looked at Ji-hoon. He nodded almost imperceptibly. Yes, baby, I'm staying. Promise? I promise. The child smiled in his sleep, his small face relaxing into an expression of pure contentment. Grace held him closer, this boy who wasn't hers by blood, but was hers by every other measure that mattered. Ji-hoon returned to his chair. There's something else you should know. About me. About what I do. I know what you do. Grace's voice was calm. I'm not naive. I've seen the men who come to the house. I've heard the phone calls. I know that the import-export business is not exactly what it claims to be. He was surprised. And that doesn't frighten you? Mr. Park, Ji-hoon, I grew up in Lagos. I've seen violence. I've seen corruption. I've seen powerful men do terrible things and call it business. She met his eyes directly. But I've also seen you with your son. I've seen you be gentle. I've seen you try, even when you're exhausted, even when you don't know how. A man who can be both things, a man who contains multitudes, that doesn't frighten me. What frightens me is simple cruelty. What your mother did tonight, that frightened me. She won't ever have the chance to hurt you again. You have my word. Your word means something in your world? In my world, it means everything. Break your word, and you're dead. Grace nodded slowly. Then I'll trust it. I'll trust you. For Minjin's sake, and for mine. They sat together as the snow continued to fall outside, as the house grew warmer, as Minjin slept the deep sleep of a child who had cried himself empty and found comfort on the other side. 2 people from different worlds, bound together by love for the same small boy, by the shared understanding that family was not always blood, that sometimes it was choice, that sometimes it was forged in crisis and tempered in snow. 3 months later, the house felt different, lighter somehow. Grace had her own suite in the East Wing, decorated with photographs of her family in Nigeria and Minjin's endless artwork. She ate dinner with them every night, not in the kitchen but at the table. She called Ji-hoon by his first name. She laughed freely. Minjin bloomed like a flower, finally given enough sun. And Ji-hoon? He came home earlier. He read the bedtime stories. He learned about thunderstorms and circular carrots and the precise number of songs required for sleep. He learned to be a father from watching Grace be a mother, learned that presence mattered more than perfection, that love was shown in small daily gestures rather than grand occasional ones. Soojin never came back. She sent letters at first, then emails, then nothing. She had moved to a condominium in the city, surrounded by other wealthy widows, who spent their days playing cards and complaining about ungrateful children. She told her friends that her son had married beneath him, that he was raising his child wrong, that she had been forced out of her own home by a scheming immigrant. She never told them the truth, that she had tried to kill a woman out of jealousy, that she had traumatized her grandson, that she had revealed herself to be exactly what she always feared being: irrelevant, powerless, alone. On a Sunday morning 6 months after that terrible night, Grace stood at the window of her room watching Minjin play in the garden. The snow was long gone, replaced by spring flowers. The boy was chasing butterflies, laughing, alive in a way he hadn't been in years. Ji-hoon appeared beside her, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He offered her one. "Thank you," she said, taking it. "For everything. For saving me. For trusting me. For giving me a family when I thought I'd lost mine." "Thank you," he replied, "for saving my son. For staying when you had every reason to leave. For teaching me that family is built, not born." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the child they both loved run through the garden, his laughter carrying on the warm breeze like a promise, like a prayer, like proof that even the coldest nights could give way to spring. And somewhere across the city, in a sterile condominium with floor-to-ceiling windows that showed everything and revealed nothing, an old woman sat alone and wondered what might have been different if she had simply opened the door, if she had chosen love over fear, if she had understood before it was too late that holding on too tightly is just another way of letting go. But some lessons come too late to matter. Some doors, once closed, can never be opened again. Some families, once broken, remain broken forever. Grace and Ji-hoon learned this in that moment. Minjin, playing in the garden below, would learn it years later when he tried to reconcile with his grandmother and found only walls where bridges used to be. But on that Sunday morning, with the coffee warm and the child laughing and the spring sun making everything new, they chose to believe in second chances, in redemption, in the radical possibility that people could change, that love could heal, that families could be built from ruins. They chose hope. And sometimes, when the world is kind and the snow has melted and the butterflies return, hope is enough. If this story moved you, pause for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been judged by someone who feared losing their place in someone's heart? Have you witnessed cruelty disguised as protection? Have you ever had to choose between blood loyalty and doing what's right, even when it cost you everything? Share your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about redemption, chosen family, and the courage to break toxic cycles, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.